And I said, those are the unsung heroes. They're not the high achievers in Uganda. They're certainly not the women in the politics who are being used, okay? These women are being used, they're being controlled by the men, but they're the people who actually keep the society together.
Running, right.
And if you imagine if you let them loose, you're probably right, then the productivity would just rise.
Your child has to be able to do that with their whole being and not be prevented from it because they're sickly, they're malnourished, they're just not getting enough attention because it's one mother looking after 6 children because she's never had access to the modern contraception. And she has to go out and work and feed them because all the father does is go out, get his money, come back and go to the bar. And it happens a lot. I've worked in northern part of Uganda. I studied in Mbara. We did a lot of community health, and these are problems. So while the West may have its own problems, the Western kind of education, I just think that we can't be in this day and age, the Western imposed on us their education hundreds of years ago, whatever it is. We can't be sitting here and still using that as an excuse when we have had the opportunity, us as learned Ugandans, to make an impact on our education system. For instance.
So actually, if I may interject, if I can try and I am not disagreeing with the analysis. But I'm simply saying that if we are therefore going to get to the root problem, the woman you just described, why is she not able to take care of the 6 children? Why is it that even in her own terms, she's not flourishing? Even within the culture, she is not flourishing. Why is that the case? And I am suggesting that we need to think together what led to that time, to that place.
Welcome back to the Two Sages podcast. It's David here, and thank you for keeping with us for yet another episode. Today we have an awesome guest and the Two Sages still. And as usual, we start out on a lighter note or a highlight, something that has gone on in your life between now and the last time we met. The usual ritual.
You want me to start? It seems a long time since we've met, actually, and I think I've been traveling around Europe. I made a trip to Addis for a coffee thing. Was that since we last met?
Yeah.
And then went on there to Geneva and then to Madrid for another coffee event. So it was lovely, actually. I was with a whole group of Ugandans, basically all involved in the coffee industry. And I'm chairman of this organization called the Commercial Coffee Producers of Uganda. And it's exciting because it involves a whole spectrum of Ugandans and me. But I'm a Ugandan. And but it's just like, all of these people are young, like sort of 40. I suppose Kapchorwa's on him. He's a little older, but they're young people, and so there's represented cooperatives, women's groups. Nobody had ever heard of Ugandan coffee in Madrid.
Oh my God!
Wow.
They never heard it, and yet they drink it, but they just don't know it. It's not branded. So when we would give them our coffee to drink, they'd be like, "Oh, this is nice." So yeah, that was great. And then after that, I went down to see my granddaughter Tuli, who's at school in South Africa, and she's a 15-year-old philosopher. Fantastic, you know. So we really have great conversations. I think the very old Zach, like you, okay, and the very young, like me, and the very young can have very good.
I am coming for you. You're setting yourself up.
You know. Anyway, today we're the Two Sages.
Yeah.
The sage and the sage. But then we're with this beautiful young girl called Dr. Marianne Calnan. Yeah.
Young girl,
Young
indeed.
girl,
Ian.
yeah. We have known for what, 25 at least years?
Yeah, at least
At least.
26.
Yeah, at least that.
Wow.
26 years.
Marianne was my first medical director for the first IHK when we used to have an old Kampala.
See?
And
That
she was
is
always
very
very,
good.
she was always keeping me right, actually. And then she went on to greater things to be director of this, that, and what in various international countries. And then Trump, President Trump, to give him his full title, gave us a great service because he shut down the program she was working and she had to come back to Uganda. So now Uganda's Trump's loss is Uganda's gain. You were in the Philippines, weren't you?
Yes, I
Yes.
was.
That's amazing.
Yeah, so so that's me.
That is amazing.
Great. Interesting stuff.
Mhm.
I think one day we should talk about coffee.
Yes.
I
Yeah,
agree.
by the way.
I
And-
agree.
And the culture of coffee.
It's
I
a big
agree.
deal for Uganda, to be honest. Yeah,
Yeah, because like
it's a big deal.
Madrid, they had a lot of coffee. They've been
Yeah.
drinking our coffee for
Yeah.
a couple of years.
I hope you'll not say when we talk about coffee, we won't talk about politics. Because Ian might say, let's keep it to coffee. But you can't talk about coffee without politics. Anyway.
So you want to say that the coffee culture, the coffee market is driven by politics?
Oh,
Oh,
my
yes.
goodness.
According to this guy?
No,
everything's driven by
it's not
politics.
according to me. It's not according to this guy. Do the numbers. Study. We have to discuss coffee, colonialism.
And so that's where the politics comes in.
No.
Global
The whole
perspective
range. No, actually, I'm really sorry, David. It's not a highlight. It's actually a very low light. January and February were horrible months for me. Yeah, and I was sad most of those 2 months. And what really made me sad is Uganda. It's just, we had a horrible election in my view.
When
I
Jack
mean-
says sad, he means depressed.
No. Please, doctor, I did not come to you for a diagnosis. I know what I'm talking about.
He needs help. He needs help.
And you can see why I would never go
Yes.
to him for diagnosis, because he's so biased. He will say, hey, you're about to go off the rails.
Next thing you'll be calling me a colonialist. I'm an Irish colonialist.
Of course he is. Of course, you know, these Irish, having experienced colonialism, they went and perfected it because they had learned it from the worst, the Brits.
Yeah,
So they came and they really said, what the Brits did to us, we shall do worse. These
I
Irish.
can't deny some of that. When you look at some of the there were Irish generals who were colonized who went out and did it to the Indians.
Yeah.
Anyway,
So thank you, Ian. I'm like, today is a good day. Ian is accepting certain truths so quickly. Right. So it really was. I was sad that as a country we haven't made progress in terms of political processes, the key democratic events become something else. So it was sad because there are friends of mine who were arrested, detained. It was sad because, so that was really sad. It was also sad because of the global events. So it's really been, I must admit, I've asked deep questions about what it means to be human. I've asked myself deep questions about ideas of God. There are ideas of God that I think completely must be thrown out because they are part of our problem. So, and because I'm in those spaces where God language, God is a big talk, that too makes me very sad. That the people who speak that language are some of the very, very people that are the reason for this repression, violence that is completely. So I won't get into that because it's all in public domain. And the impact of it, though, so it's not a theoretical thing. It's personal. It's affected.
Yeah.
I think the glorious, the beautiful part of these 2 months was spending a week in Kisoro. Kisoro is beautiful. It's remarkable. I slept very well. The weather was good. I mean, I could go on. Grandchildren, family. I loved it. So let me keep it there.
That's great.
Kisoro is home.
Yeah.
I grew up there. I'm a rural boy. So it really brings something. A friend of mine said maybe it's good to go back to the roots, to the ancestors. Maybe we have a conversation with the ancestors that make me happy. I don't know, but this is my friend who told me, trying to understand the secret of my joy when I'm in Kisoro. But seriously, Kisoro is beautiful. It is home. It is home.
It's your kingdom, Zach.
It's his
I-
kingdom.
It's his kingdom.
What do you mean? I have had any power there. I am really, no, seriously, you know that.
No, but I think, yeah. as you
But
said,
yeah, I am the chair of the elders of my clan.
There you go.
So I'm a sage, that is true. When I come here and I meet a fellow old man like Ian, I don't have much respect from him. But when I go in the village, I'm really respected. You know?
So you're the king of your domain.
Oh, wow,
No,
like,
actually,
that's
I see
interesting.
myself more. Anyway, yeah, so it's lovely. It's lovely. It's lovely to eat good food from the soil to seed. It comes from the garden to the table.
So farm to
It's beautiful. Yes, it's beautiful.
That's awesome. I'll give my highlight is a little related to Kisoro. So I love traveling, and when I was in university, I traveled a lot through southwestern Uganda, all those districts, and Kisoro was my best. I went to Kisoro like 6 times when I was in medical school. I told myself I
Do you
would
mind if
build
I
a
ask a
house in
question?
Kisoro.
Because I know you're not yet married.
Yes.
We have beautiful, beautiful Australian girls. So we can help you.
Pauline should not see this.
No, Pauline should see this.
So I traveled a lot through southwestern Uganda when I was a medical student. But last month I did a 26-day journey across Uganda.
Amazing.
I started out in Mayuge district through Iganga, Mbale, Kapchorwa, Namalu, Moroto, all the way. And then I was supposed to descend down, but then there's an emergency. So I went to Ian's farm and then ascended from there to the Albert region. And I saw a lot of Uganda that I'd never seen before. And how Kisoro connects to that is I have now a second favorite place in this country,
which is what?
Kapchorwa.
Kapchorwa.
Very beautiful. It's really like Kisoro.
That's true.
It's
That is-
it's really like Kisoro,
That is true.
and it's
Even the food they
untapped.
plant,
Yeah,
everything.
it's like this hidden gem where it's only Endiro that has put there. So Endiro has a coffee that side. It's like there's all this like potential for tourism and agriculture there, but it's like there's no big thing going on. So when I was in Kapchorwa, I then took a detour from my trip and I crossed to Kenya, defying the imaginary lines. I went to the next district on the other side of Kenya, which is called Kitale. And you see the big contrast that the other side, there are big farms. There's the agriculture is very mechanized. It's really the same as Kapchorwa. It's just that their side was first owned by the white settlers and they left all these farms, and this side, the history is different. So there's that thing that I felt crossing over from this side to the other side. There's an imaginary, it's really the same people. Like some people stay this side and work that side, but the two districts are like, the other district has even a functional airstrip. Like I went there and there were guys waiting for a flight and it came at 10 and they went. And I crossed this side, it's like a village. I'm like, wow. You know, and then there's a road from there all the way to the port. I was like, why haven't people built in Kapchorwa? Anyways, so the highlight since the time we met was my Trans-Uganda trip. Contrasting that, I did a 40-day trip across the US East Coast. I enjoyed this one more.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Well, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Highlight, before we get into the hard stuff.
Of this year?
So far, yeah.
I don't know about a highlight. Maybe let's call it an aha moment.
Okay.
So I volunteer at Kiruddu and I teach medical students.
Kiruddu is a hospital.
One of the national referral hospitals.
It does the medical cases.
You're right.
as
It
opposed
does
to
the adult
surgical or
medicine.
maternity. Yeah.
Zach, the adult medicine
I am an
cases.
adult.
All right. So I teach medical students, and I think the highlight of my first 2 months of this year is watching the students change the way they think because of who teaches them or who spends a lot of time interacting with them. It takes time, it takes effort, and you have to change a mindset. Like I was telling Robbie earlier on, a lot of people read to meet an end, right? So I'm reading my books so I can do the exam.
Exams, yeah.
You're right. But just encouraging them to read, to know, to expand their worldview and read different things, not only a medical textbook. I think that for me was an aha moment, meaning that the medical curriculum needs to change.
Definitely.
There you go.
Definitely.
And to encourage, young upcoming doctors to be able to understand that not everyone was meant to be a doctor who sees a patient, but you can't be a doctor like David who doesn't see patients anymore.
But we need doctors who see patients.
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree. But the way the system is now is geared is that everyone must see a patient. So you get some really horrible doctors out in practice. And they're just seeing patients because...
It was not meant for them.
Yeah, it wasn't meant for them, but they're seeing patients because that's all they know. But I think that doctors are allowed to have a portfolio of a career. So just because I did medicine doesn't mean that's what I'm sentenced to for my life. I can become an entrepreneur. I can do health writing.
A politician.
Or become a politician, right? And it's acceptable. It's acceptable,
And it's very much possible.
Yeah.
That's great. I was writing something long for the Foundry group. The Foundry is the innovation hub I did. Those who don't know, it's at Clark International University. And I was reflecting on, so I have my own personal curriculum. And the lecture I did yesterday was a 2005 lecture by Jeff Bezos at Stanford.
Mm-hmm.
And in this lecture, at that point, Amazon was just 2 years old, and he was supposed to lecture on the innovation processes inside Amazon. And in that 1 hour, I learned a lot of things. And the way he was teaching, he was talking about things he had done the previous month, things they're trying out, how they're doing the experiments. And I thought about that. The best teachers are people who are actually doing the thing, love doing the thing. And I was writing about how our education needs to change because I reflected on medicine. The best teachers in medical school were the teachers who actually loved medicine, were actively practicing it, and the other teachers who were mostly into research and grants were not very good teachers. So I thought it's the same thing with the business. I was just thinking the best business teachers are people who are running businesses. And when I was in medical school, I obviously knew I wanted to do business. So I sought out every businessman in Bara that I could. I had coffees with the owner of Global, the owner of Igongo, the owner of Mbara, Acacia, all these guys were big GBK, and that was business education for me. And I thought about how exactly Marianne is a great teacher because she actually loves medicine. If you listen to her talking about medicine, you see that. So highlight there. This crosses out to productivity, our topic today. Zach, it seems you have something you want to say.
Things change, I'm listening.
Oh, okay. So that crosses over to productivity.
You're nice to check to make sure.
Okay. So, most of our conversations about, I'll quote Zach talking about people have to flourish, not just to survive. Countries have to flourish. And I want us to talk about productivity today in terms of both the individual but also the nation, as we do. And the point we are starting from is this theme of growth. There are a lot of economic indicators that show that Africa has grown economically, yeah. And but on the other side, there's a report that I read that came out this year by the African Center for Economic Transformation, and they say there has been barely any transformation despite the growth. There is growth, but in terms of transformation, getting towards people flourishing, there is almost no transformation. And that is a little bit alluded to productivity, because we can grow in terms of numbers and how much work we are doing in numbers, but when you go down to the output of the per unit output, you find that 100 people elsewhere are doing more than what 1 million people are doing here. And that is where productivity comes in.
Mm-hmm.
And that I'll just share a few stats before we begin. So the first stat is that for every, this is an output of a research by the McKinsey company. So I'm not they're not my favorite people, the McKinsey consulting company, but they produce some of the biggest
reports, right?
Some of the biggest reports about productivity, about work, and all that. So one of their reports, which came out actually this year, said that 10% increase in labor productivity, which is output per worker, increases per capita for developing countries, GDP per capita by about 6 to 8%. And the other part of the other interesting thing in that report said that if African countries reach full gender parity in the workforce, the continent could add 287 billion to its GDP. And that takes me to the first question about productivity. As the sages, how has the lens towards productivity been over your life, and how has it changed? What is your approach towards it?
Are you asking me?
Yeah. You are the sage.
Productivity. I was thinking, okay, one of my personal characteristics is that I have to admit to being impatient. I'm impatient, and even though I'm older and I should now be a sage and wiser like Zach here, and calm and all that, I think I'm still impatient.
And that's not true. You described it.
So anyway, Zach, it's all right. And I think that it's a bad characteristic and good,
a good one.
Because it's bad in that I can get, when you're stuck in silly traffic jams and people are doing stupid things all around you, and you realize there's a huge loss of productivity in Uganda just from the roads and all that stuff. And you realize that. Everybody realizes that. And I get impatient with that. But also at the same time, maybe my impatience also drives me to achieve things. And I think we don't have all the time in the world. And then I look at, and so perhaps I'm one of these people, like Marianne, because I know her very well, who's driven. You're driven to do things, and you're driven to achieve things. You're driven to accomplish goals and things. And not because somebody sets KPIs, but because that's sort of innate. Then I look around me at many, many Ugandans, and especially, let me say the poor. Let me say the rural poor. And they're not very productive, but they're happy. Like it's kind of like I can't look at this thing of productivity in Africa, and it is probably very, very low. Somebody was talking about you can move like a huge factory, but if you locate it in Europe, you employ 6 people, and if you locate it in Africa, you probably create a lot more employment, but you don't create more productivity.
Right.
And that's what's happening with the. Because we've layered on layers, we've layered mechanization, we've layered automation, we've layered AI, and so on. So now, Western countries can be very productive without very many human beings. So when you count productivity per human being, it's a lot of output. Now, when we look at Uganda, we find, I was talking to someone this morning and talking about rural poverty. And I personally think that someone said, was there a plan, to grow the numbers in Africa? No, I think the question I was asked was, is Museveni happy with how he's grown the numbers because, a bigger country, there's a tendency for politicians to think because we've more numbers, then we're a stronger country. But most of the growth in Uganda's numbers has been in rural areas. 75% of the people are there. And most of those people who have multiplied are the rural poor, and they're subsistence farmers, and they're in they're not very productive. But they're also, like you found on your trip, they're not unhappy. They're not, we would say they're living on $2 a day, so therefore they are poor. But they themselves are comfortable because they have food in the garden. They have, they actually have some expendable, disposable income. At least the men have when they get paid because they go down to the bar. So I see poverty, but it's that kind of poverty that is not war-torn. It's not like Gaza.
It's not like in DC, the poor people in
No,
DC.
it's
By
not.
the way, that's right. I saw that in London. When I was working in London, I would go to the high-rise apartments where you would see real poverty because it was horrible. It was grinding. It was dirty. It was awful. But when I see the people around my farm and the women have carrying a child on their back and then they're coming to pick coffee and stuff. Now, the women are the ones, if I would say anyone was being put upon, it's the women.
Yes.
Because they are there, they don't have property rights. They're doing the work in the garden. They're looking after the children. If they get some money, they put it into the family. And the men are quite happy. Then the men appear when there is property or money to get, So it's a funny situation where you have this kind of equilibrium, where as long as there's sunshine and as long as there's rain, and climate change may change things, and as long as there's a little bit of land, people are in poverty, not very productive at all, but they're, except for children. They're producing more children who are now going into another cycle of poverty. Yeah. And, so I've been thinking about this. And to bring it to women, because we have a woman on our, very productive woman on our podcast. Those women are the people who hold. I wrote a newspaper column this week. It's not out yet. It'll come out on Saturday. And I said, those are the unsung heroes. They're not the high achievers in Uganda. They're certainly not the women in the politics who are being used, okay? These women are being used, they're being controlled by the men, but they're the people who actually keep the society together.
Running, right.
And if you imagine if you let them loose, you're probably right, then the productivity would just rise. So yeah, those are my thoughts.
Thank you.
Something interesting happened at home this last time I was in the village. My brother, his wife is Hope. Hope's mother passed about 2 weeks ago. And 3 weeks ago, so I wasn't able to do the funeral, the burial together. When I got home, of course I visited Hope, and Tofa is my younger brother. And it was very interesting the way the conversation went between me, Hope, and Tofa, my brother. Because I asked, so Hope, how old was your mom when she passed? And she said, according to what they can work out, possibly 96 years.
Mm-hmm.
And she then explained to me what a wise woman, what a loving woman, in fact, her nickname in the village was Wisdom. What a remarkable woman she was. And then she chipped in and said, imagine what she could have become if she had formal education.
Mm-hmm.
And I quickly say to her, Hope, formal education for what? She was educated enough for her time and for her culture. That is how come she lived to 96 years. So you can argue that if we are to go by numbers of longevity in life, you could say, here is a woman, and actually there's a massive story about her children. So I think, therefore, we really must grapple with it, especially as Africans, with the question of productivity and relate it to flourishing. So the first question we really must
So, Zach,
ask
can I
is
ask you a question on this?
Sure.
Because I think it's a very interesting point that you realize about flourishing, that you're making about flourishing. If you're, if those folks around my farm in Chanjojo are, you know, they don't have much money, and you found this when you were, but their lifestyle, they have enough food to eat. They, you know, most of their needs are met, but they're poor, and they're not getting, the kids are not getting an education, so the next generation will also be poor. Are they flourishing?
So again, we must ask ourselves the question, what's education? So there is definitely a correlation between flourishing and education. But every culture must really come to conclusion what education really is, what learning is all about. I give you my story. My father and my mother were, by Western standards, poor. My father and my mother didn't have any cash. So you can't even say they lived on $1 per day. There was no metrics at the time to measure, quote unquote, their wealth or their productivity. In the village where we lived, my father and mother were the most wealthy. One of the reasons they were the most wealthy is my father and my mother had enough food. My father and my mother, because they had enough food, their kids were healthy. We ate very well, and we ate enough. And in fact, to the extent that people in our village knew that if there was a crisis for seed for planting, they would come to my father. My father passed at the age of, we think, 86, maybe towards 90. My mother died also in her 80s. So I would say that although on the matrices of Western poverty indicators, my father and my mother, and I grew up poor, I can say to you, my first pair of shoes I ever owned, I was 18, right?
But you're not answering the question, Zach, because we're looking at today. I appreciate the richness of the culture that you grew up in. I appreciate your father. You know, they didn't have money by Western
Cash
standards.
poor.
Yeah, and actually, if I may agree with you, I have quoted Kathy Koo, very, very bright South Korean, American South Korean, who told me the South Koreans are very productive and they're miserable.
Yeah.
Because they've developed so fast and they work so hard. So I appreciate all that,
So
but I'm still bringing you back to the question.
No,
of-
I'm coming
yeah,
here. I think that there's an answer you're looking for.
Mm.
That's not what I have.
For any answer, not any particular
I'm
answer.
coming.
Any answer.
No,
Yeah.
I'm coming. I'm simply wanting to say to you that
Yeah.
the first question we've got to ask is the indicators of productivity that are used today are out of sync with the culture of most of the peoples of the continent, the cultures that have shaped them. And one of the challenges that have not happened or has happened is we welcomed, or rather, Western education was forced upon us, and it's Western religion and everything. That culture was forced upon us that had a particular way of measuring the world. Of course, it ignored any forms of learning that existed, because forms of learning of the time were all determined and decided, they say, to be, in the instance, pagan, the second instance, backward. So we can't even talk about medicine.
But you're going back to this whole
Ian, give me
argument
some
between
time.
Western
Give me some
and
time. There's
Western
absolutely
and
no way you
cultural.
can
So-
deny that, because if you deny it,
Marianne wants to enter.
if you deny it, yes, please.
I want to say that I agree, culture, but I have to ask you, does culture not evolve? Because when we talk about culture, and I'm speaking of it as a woman, I didn't grow up in a regular cultural home where the woman is expected to, sit down, keep quiet,
Be subservient.
be subservient. I was always encouraged, get out there, speak for yourself, do what you need to do.
We noticed.
You notice. But when you think about, like Ian was saying, this is a lady, she already gave birth. She's holding the child. She's going out to pick the coffee. She's going to leave the coffee, go home, clean up, cook food. And how much has the husband done? Why? Because she's following the cultural thing of what a woman should do. But should culture not evolve to accommodate, like you're saying, the gender disparity? If women were given the same equal opportunity as men,
Actually, it's,
would we
to be
not-
very honest with you, you're not.
would we not do
you're stopping
better?
me in my own trains for making the case.
Oh,
Because
okay.
I didn't even say that culture is static. No.
Okay.
I simply am analyzing the factors that create culture.
I agree.
And wait a moment.
Mhm.
I'm not even sure what you're agreeing to because I haven't yet said it.
No, but you are saying culture is not static.
It's not static.
yes,
We agree with that.
Yes, I'm agreeing
Yeah,
that
Yeah,
it's
so
not
I'm
static.
suggesting to you that
Oh, it
we
should
must-
not
we
be.
must reflect
Mhm.
on the things that form or transform culture.
Right.
And the question of how societies cohere, societies flourish.
Mhm.
And so I was going to education.
Mhm.
Right?
Yeah, yeah, please.
And I was
yeah.
going to say to you, we have an education imposed upon African societies. And I can speak that for my father.
Okay.
You know. So by the way, I am a second generation within my village. I am a second generation, what you might say, Western educated.
Educated. Yeah.
Mhm.
My father went up to what might today be primary 4.
Okay.
But my father could read and write. In fact, my father was possibly even more educated than myself now. Because my father could speak and read Luganda, he could speak and read Swahili, he could speak and read his own mother tongue, Rufumbira. Here I am, I speak, and read English, very fluently, not as fluently as my own mother tongue, which is a shame. And I don't have any other speaking, reading abilities of the kind that my father had. So, and I'm simply saying that we've got to think about, there is absolutely no doubt that by the matrices of the Western world, the growth numbers that he's speaking about, there is absolutely no doubt that we lag behind. Absolutely no doubt. When you talk about gender parity, I absolutely agree. There is a challenge. But I don't think that enough work, enough research has been done. The extent to which the question you call gender parity existed in some of these primal societies before the invasion of the West. And of course, it's been also established that the Western world itself, in its own previous histories, had issues like this. So we've got to go back to the history, the Industrial Revolution, and the way it related to the technology. We've had this session on technology. Were there existing forms of technology in African societies? Were those technologies ever given chance? What really happened? We had a conversation here about. So the point I'm really trying to put forward is that we can paint a broad brush and throw poverty numbers, productivity numbers, and we ignore that these numbers are imposed on a people for whom the way they define flourishing. So I am simply saying, can we go back and have a conversation on what does human flourishing look like? What does human flourishing look like for a Western woman, born and bred in the villages of whether it's Switzerland or Oxford or California? You can even take us to urban Chicago. What do those numbers of productivity look like? We can talk to the Nordic company. Before we make comparisons, then we come to Kisoro, to the people that I met this week, who Ian speaks about being happy. So what is happiness? So I think that a conversation on happiness matters because yes, there are indications that productivity numbers may be very high, but happiness is very low. So I really think we need to go deeper and not just throw numbers and not just throw ideas of gender parity. What does that mean? My mother had adequate access to land. I speak about my mother. My mother had no such problems of, because there was a way in which the economy worked and included her, right? Does the Western economy that was completely steeped in patriarchy, Western economies were steeped completely in patriarchy. Absolutely. So the Westerners can't come here and tell us about Western parity. No. Patriarchy born and bred, there was a religion of patriarchy. So all I'm simply saying is that these factors do exist in all these societies. My conversation that I demand is that we have a conversation on what does human flourishing look like. And here you can shake your head. There is a way. Yeah, you can shake your head. But I'm simply saying that our societies have an understanding of flourishing. Let's grapple with it.
Okay, well then I have a question. Sorry, Marianne, but it's just, yeah. So a lot of people would say politically, because there's a lot of politics in this country, but a lot of people would say that politically it has been, that the current regime it's been in their interest to keep people poor, because those people are their voters. And the majority of poor are in the rural areas, and that's where the support for the current NRM is. Okay, so it's like, let me just keep the people poor. So there's an argument, which you seem to be saying, is that no, culturally these people weren't educated by Western standards. They were happy, they were wise, okay? And then the colonials came in and imposed Western standards, and WTO and all these Western organizations measure productivity in a certain way. And actually, you know what? In Uganda, we have a lot of so-called rural poor, but in fact, they're better off than the Koreans who went like that.
That's not what I'm saying, Ian.
Okay. Well, it sounds like
Absolutely, no, Ian. This is actually, I'll be honest with you. This is not a laughing argument. And I'll tell you why. I'll tell you this. It's very serious. Because you see, the imposition by the West, we can't take it lightly. The imposition of an education system, of a technology. And I'm not justifying it. Actually, I will say this to you. And I take my time to study hegemony, hegemonic economies, and how they function. By the way, another sad moment for me in this beginning of the year was Marco Rubio's talk, Marco Rubio's speech to the European Group of Defense.
Right.
And what Marco Rubio said was telling. Marco Rubio said we must return to 500 years ago of Western hegemony, when the West controlled the world. He was very clear. And he actually said, we must do everything we can to recolonize. We must do everything we can to have access to the rare earth minerals. We must do everything we can to control. Now, I can say this to you, that these global Western dominated hegemonic systems, precisely like President Museveni and his team, what do they seek to do? Keep these countries poor so that they can be plundered. That is true. It's been established. You can check with Congo, you can check with, so it is true. So what you see at a micro level, Uganda, it is true at the global level. Of course, now there is a fight between the West and the Chinese and so on for the control of access to this energy. We have had conversations around energy. Who is going to control energy? So you can't take away these macro pictures from the micro. And I want to therefore say, what are some of the indigenous, what are some of the productive systems of productivity? I can speak to you about land, the question of land.
Let's go back to education.
Sure.
Because you didn't.
No, I was going to come back to land. Because I think I've finished with education. That if you
but you've
keep coming.
You've said you've said that the Western education system, which was imposed, by the Western hegemonies, hasn't really added much as such.
I wonder.
And when I look at my, sorry.
I had actually thought I'd interject, then I decided to be nice,
To be
Zach.
nice,
No.
Right.
It's not time to be nice. The deep conversation.
My thoughts are this, that I agree to an extent that we have to contextualize how we interpret a situation. But on the other hand, think about this, like the lady, I'm talking about this family and I see them all the time. They're cash poor. They have food to eat because, they live off their land. They have a roof of some sort over their head. The child goes to school or intermittently goes to school. If they have money, the child goes. And a catastrophe strikes. So while years and years ago, it may have been okay because community comes around and everyone will come together and bring money and take your child to the hospital and, get treated. That sense of community no longer exists. So you're in it alone. And so if the systems we're living in don't keep up with whatever metrics are being imposed on us, we will have people who will continually live in poverty, and that cycle of poverty will keep, it's a vicious cycle.
Flourish.
And we will not, I don't want to use the word flourish because I think flourish is very contextual.
Yes.
My flourishing is different than yours, David, because our parameters are different. But in terms of being healthy, in terms of your child is able to get up, go to attend whatever educational system you want, whether it's the madrasa where, it's based on religion, or the Western kind based on, structure and topics, or our traditional one, which is through storytelling and, passing on of lessons. Your child has to be able to do that with their whole being and not be prevented from it because they are sickly, they are malnourished, they're just not getting enough attention because it's one mother looking after 6 children because she's never had access to the modern contraception. And she has to go out and work and feed them because all the father does is go out, get his money, come back and go to the bar. And it happens a lot. I've worked in northern part of Uganda. I studied in Mbara. We did a lot of community health. And these are problems. So while the West may have its own problems, the Western kind of education, I just think that we can't be, in this day and age, the Western imposed on us their education hundreds of years ago, whatever it is. We can't be sitting here and still using that as an excuse when we have had the opportunity, us as learned Ugandans, to make an impact on our education system. For instance.
So actually, if I may interject, if I can try and get there, I am not disagreeing with the analysis. But I'm simply saying that if we are therefore going to get to the root problem, the woman you just described, why is she not able to take care of the 6 children? Why is it that even in her own terms, she's not flourishing? Even within the culture, she is not flourishing. Why is that the case? And I am suggesting that we need to think together what led to that time, to that place. And by the way, truth be told, and this is my story, it's not hundreds of years ago. It's simply one generation.
But what did later?
Wait a moment. So I think that's the conversation we should have, and that's where I really want to lead us to, because I can definitely say, I am simply saying, my father's generation, my mother and father, their generation flourished for their time. My generation and my children's generation, who are today's, they are not flourishing. What has happened? Now, it is true, we had high infant mortality rates, absolutely. In fact, my parents' generation, they didn't even name a child when the child was born. One of the reasons they had to give birth to many children, they provided for. But they had ways in which those who were born and lived. So that happened. There was a flourishing of a nature of the kind that was within the time. And my evidence for that is people actually, my father and parents' generation, lived much longer. I can speak to you. My generation, I am now a remnant. The majority of my peers actually died. The majority of my peers. Now my generation, we went to university, the people that I can reference you to, they had enough money, the children are the ones that are in school. So you would say, by the matrices, by the parameters of the West, you could say, so I asked myself, why is my generation not being able to live in their 80s? A majority of number of them, And I'm simply saying that why we must have conversations around flourishing and to some degree ignore these growth and matrices and simply ask what has gone wrong in Africa, that in fact, the point you made, there has been no progress. The point you made, there is no progress. And the reason there is no progress is not because there is no hard work. Is not because, and Ian might then quickly say, I know where you're going. It's politics. Because politics is about the distribution of public goods and services.
So, Zach, I wouldn't...
and the reason why I want to locate the local politics to the national and to the global is because that is what is true. The numbers that determine global poverty is the US dollar, $1 per day, all right? It's not about the beans that are in the market or the gardens that are being planted. Now today, the biggest people who are taking over farms, you told the story of Kitale.
Yeah.
Why is Kitale on the other side of the border looking more prosperous than Kapchorwa on the other side of the border? And you were very clear. The farms the other side of Kitale were first owned by the colonial, right? Of course, there will be now those who argue, oh, so Uganda could be better off if it had had a settler community. There are those arguments. Because you see, when you say Kitale, on the other hand side, has evidently Western progress, if I can use that language, and Kapchorwa, this side, doesn't have that. And we can have a conversation. It's actually a good indicator. Why are these two different? And there is no doubt there is a difference in terms of political history, which itself has led to the way societies are managed. So I think I would like personally for us to have a conversation on what causes those numbers to be what they ought to be, or what leads to a society flourishing. That for me is what I would like us to consider.
So I want to get Ian's comment, then I want to share
Well,
another
I'm actually
story
frustrated with this
to continue.
conversation because I think, Zach, you're too academic about it. You're coming out of my father was this and so on. But when you look at it, basically, there's three of us here are doctors actually, medical doctors and an academic.
No, actually, I don't think, Ian, it's fair on you to dismiss what I'm saying.
I'm
And
not
many
dis-
people, no, you
not
are.
dismissing.
When you say you are academic, you're making a statement about what I'm saying. I think you can make your point without necessarily saying mine is academic. Because I can come back to you and say, you're being academic as well. And you are academic here.
So I'm saying you're being too academic on your analysis of this. You're coming at it from an academic point of view. I still say that. Because look at this. And the reason I was going to say about being a doctor and stuff like that is because of vaccinations, because of certain aspects of modern medicine, the survival rate, as you said, your parents' generation, a lot of people died, a lot of children died. So our survival rate, if you analyze the different generations, is much, much higher today. The infant mortality is much lower. Lots of indicators are much lower. They're not great, in terms of what they are in the Western world, but they're much lower. So therefore, we have a relative population explosion, a relative population increase, okay? So that, I remember somebody telling me that, during, it would be your parents' time, we had about 6 million population here. Now we've got 50 million. Yeah. So if we look at the practicalities, in other words, I'm saying we've had this rapid increase in rural population who exist in this kind of place where, can you say they're flourishing? Can you say, but the only way I see out of it is education. The only way out of this generational poverty to me is how do the next generation progress? And that education system, for better or for worse, was probably brought to Africa by the colonialists. Okay? And you're saying your parents and your grandparents, your parents in particular, were wise people and they did well, they lived into their 80s and 90s. And that was the Africa that was then. But it was a much smaller population. And simply, I want to say this in terms of the politics. Where politics comes into it is the politicians are supposed to rule for the best interests of their people. That's why they're politicians. They're elected. But in many countries, it's become party politics, and the politicians become separated from the interests of the people. Even in China, one thing you have to admire about you don't say we like an authoritarian regime, but they were working. They knew that they had a population of over 1 billion people, and they were working to raise the standards of their population, and that drove the Chinese Communist Party a lot. Much and all as I'm not saying that I agree with that particular system, but what drives us here? The reason that politics comes into it is because those politicians are supposed to look at the rapid population increase and say, How do we provide schools? How do we provide healthcare? How
Right.
do we provide, rural industry and agriculture and that sort of thing? And it's not necessarily bound by the dollar, but by, how can I say it? Not just leaving people to just fend for themselves as rural
Okay,
peasants.
so I can tell you my story.
Yeah.
I have actually been involved in attempts and processes for the reform of education in this country.
Okay.
And there have been attempts. At one particular period in my own life, I chaired the Board of Education for the Church of Uganda. And when the current Education Act that is in place, and I wish I could tell you the amount of effort we undertook to make a case as to why the education system in which the Ugandan must work with and live in is an education system that will lead nowhere.
I could believe that.
Yeah.
We did this, I was involved in this process, and this was actually in the very beginning of the NRM era. I gave a keynote paper at an NRM conference in the late 1980s. And I was very, very clear. I was aware of what needed to be done to the education system. So in part, yes, you talk about frustration. I am a very frustrated person vis-a-vis the failure of our Uganda to actually reform its own education system. So that's the first thing. So the things you speak about, I've invested my life into, and I can see. And I can tell you, Ian, in that particular period, the World Bank, which had a particular idea of economic reforms, imposed the structural adjustment programs.
Of course.
One
Yeah,
of
yeah,
the
give me
worst
time.
things that has
Yeah,
happened
give me
to
time.
us.
So when it happened, those of us who were making a case for homegrown solutions, for the reformation, I agree with you. We African leaders, the time for blaming the Western colonialists must be over.
Yes.
But let
It
me
is
tell
over.
you, it is not over.
It's not.
It is not over. The
I
systems
disagree
that
on that.
govern the world, the systems that govern, whether it's WTO, whether it's, I mean, you can see the debate around the standard of the dollar. So we can have this debate, and we should actually. I think we need to have that debate
Right.
because it's actually crucial. So all I'm simply saying that at that time, David, the World Bank imposition structural adjustment systems were so unbelievably present, literally in the Ministry of Finance, literally everywhere. Now, I can say this, that President Museveni and his team took advantage of that. They didn't have to, all right? They didn't have to. It wasn't being forced down their throats. But, they took advantage of it because they knew by buying into that, ostensibly for the sake of the Ugandans, they could be able to hold on to power. And where are we at now? We have had discussion about it, a hopeless education system that's leading nowhere. And there is a history to it. And I totally agree with you. If we don't transform learning, if we don't transform education, the point you're talking about, the medical doctor trained at Makerere in the last 10, 20 years, I don't think is going to be relevant in today's world because it's a completely different world. But we had the opportunity to change this. So I would go back to a conversation we've had. What has failed us as Africans is us leaders. And I have said this actually before, that one of the main challenges of African leadership is we actually haven't had thought leaders. Leaders who think, leaders who ask questions about flourishing. What does it mean to flourish? Therefore, questions about land. So education, definitely. Question about land and productivity. Question about, you can't discuss productivity without labor. You can't discuss labor without education, learning, ways in which people are. So all of that is actually included. And you can't deny that there are certain global systems. And what we have lacked is effective leadership, Ugandan leadership,
African leadership. What kind of leaders do we have in Uganda today? Predators. They're worse than the colonialists. They're worse versions of those colonialists. And I simply say, even professionals, one of the most painful things for me is the African elite. African elites are extremely selfish. They can do travel ways. We have produced a very selfish, individualistic, capitalistic African elite. Totally useless for the development of the flourishing of Africans.
Which is why, sorry, David, let me just add.
Yes.
Let me add to that. So that comes back to my point where I'm saying that what worked in Zach's parents' time cannot work now.
I agree.
Because community was a big thing. Right now, like you said, we're really individualistic. If I step out, the first thing I'm doing is first taking care of myself, and then if I have any leftover empathy, it's going to then spill over to whoever it is. And so you find that a lot of people, when you ask them to stretch themselves to do something that's a little bit different, a little bit extra, the question is, what is in it for me?
I know.
And so I think then that means that whatever systems we have put in place have to ensure that, and comes back to leadership, have to ensure that people who don't know how to speak up for themselves, how to grab what they want, like you were saying, first fend for yourself, like wrangle it out, right? Then there have to be systems in place that protect them.
That's what I said. That's what politics is
Yes,
supposed to be about.
it's supposed to be. And so then it brings me to my thing. I believe leadership is a pipeline. So it's not because I'm a leader, it stops with me, right? I have to make sure that there's going to be a leader after me in a certain way. And so on. So it's a pipeline. And I can say that because Ian was one of my first bosses. Ian gave me the permission. And okay, maybe permission is too whatever, but he gave me leeway, the range, right, to develop myself. Of course, we would butt heads and we would agree and disagree, but he gave me the permission to take up the space that I think I need to take up to make my environment a better place. And so if I think that Ian did that for me, then the onus is on me to do it for somebody else. And so when I keep telling people leadership is a pipeline, it doesn't start and stop with you. So what have you done to bring the next leader on? And maybe then that speaks to sort of like a succession plan as well, because a lot of leaders do not have any thought of succession. It's like, I'm the leader, and in that part, if you look at it politically, I'm the leader, I'm going to stay here until I die. But is that the way our country or our community should actually live?
And that's why the Two Sages podcast is here. For the next generation. But I wanted to pause the both of you because we went a deep dive to Zach's answer. But I didn't get Marianne's answer. In terms of what is your approach towards productivity? What you have given us a little bit, but it has been in response. In terms from your experience, how, and also it would be good to get your context based on having worked here and in the Philippines and in Southern Africa. What is your take on productivity for our generation and also for the larger discussion?
So, and I'll say this from the point of view that I was brought up differently. So I wasn't brought up like traditional sit and no, you should be seen but not heard. I was always seen and heard. But in every country I've worked in, which is classified as a low to middle income countries, women are seen, the general population, of course, women have broken the barriers, but the general bulk of women are still seen and not heard. And a lot of it then is put back culturally. This is our expected place. So women will do a lot of heavy lifting, but there is no economic return for that.
Exactly.
So if we monetized, and I know Zach may have but I'm just saying for the dollars, now we're counting the dollars. If we monetized every task a woman did from the time she woke up till the time she went to bed, and converted that into how much cash she would have, I think that women would be more productive, because we tend to, take care of ourselves, but you're taking care of the family. And when the family is taken care of, then also of the community. Like, I am sure if Zach looked back and see how many people his mother actually looked after, it's going to be more than the immediate family, right? So if she was maybe one of the lucky few who had her own land, she was, kind of economically empowered. But I was reading something this morning that said, while 1/3 of all businesses in Uganda are actually owned by women, the businesses that they own are the ones that have the least return on investment.
Mm-hmm.
So even if I'm a woman entrepreneur and I'm like, okay, I've liberated myself, I'm out there, I'm owning my business, the kind of business I'm more likely to own is the one that is less profitable than, say, a man with my similar kind of upbringing or potential or opportunity. And I think then that's what brings me back to productivity. The kinds of spaces I've been, for a longest time, I always found, one, I was the only woman. If there were other women, then I was the only Black woman. So you sort of like stick out like a sore thumb, and you have to make a case, like you're always trying to prove that I belong in this room, or I belong at this table. And for a lot of people, it's draining. How much more can you keep proving time over time? Like, you have done it, but you have to still prove that you are the right person for that opportunity, to give you that chance to be more productive, so to speak. But personally, productivity for me is not only about what I produce, it's also about the influence I have on other people in my circle and what they produce. So if I'm not able to get you to be productive, then I don't think I'm productive. And I'll give you an example, right? So I help you along some days, right? If I know, oh, David needs to expand that app to 100,000 people. Right now he's at 50,000. My productivity increases if I increase yours by, for instance, I will say, oh, I know so and so, so and so, so and so. Let me call them. Let me pitch David's idea and make sure that David is actually in the door, not at the door, because there's a difference, right? Because if David is in that room, then he can make a justification. He can justify why, you need him to help you become more productive than you currently are. And I guess maybe for a lot of people, when you measure productivity, like I'm looking at productivity metrics, it's like what I can do. But we're not looking at what our community can
It's
do.
how you amplify yourself.
Right.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Great.
that's my definition of
That's
productivity.
that's very interesting. Now, I want us to close this discussion on a point about the future, because something happened to our ancestors here in Africa. The thing that Zach alludes to, that foreigners came and imposed a lot of things on us. And the fact is, they stood no chance. They stood no chance because of the military power, but also the way the other people had come to take things by force. Like we started, the kingdom of heaven has suffered violence, and the violent take it by force. So you would say that it's a ring, and there are blows being taken. So with in regards with the future, that's the thing I was saying, that we are at a point that I think we can no longer blame the West, because we know that the WHO, the WTO, the UN, and every other person, even if they do their best, they can't save us. And we know that the world has changed. There is a global economic system that was designed not for us, literally. Because as I was telling you in Kapchorwa, that these guys who own hills with rivers, but they are money poor. And then there are people in New York with a small apartment and a laptop, and money gets created out of nowhere. Like they have less resources, but they have more money. So for me, I've been grappling with this global economic system, but it exists.
Yep.
And that is the way things are run. And the only way to go from where we are to a better place, whether it's on our terms, it's on other people's, like the metrics have to be defined by someone. And it is best if they're defined by us. But for them to be defined by us, we have to have the power to define those metrics. And so the question goes down to how to make that happen. Because if the people in the 14 million people in Israel are sitting down and doing things that end up having this kind of impact, whether we like it or not, it's affecting us. Yeah. And then for us, then the onus is on us. Like, how much can we do to counter that kind of work? If people sit down in China and do certain things and they affect us here, whether we want it or not, what can we do? Because we can't complain. Yeah? Like, okay, we can't complain, but it will not change the situation. And more so for the next generation. Because we could say that our situation is like this because of what happened to our ancestors. But 50 years from now, our children should say differently, probably. So that is the question that comes in. That now the younger generation, how should they approach productivity?
So for me, the first thing I would say is that we must renounce the dominant narratives. The narratives that have defined me as poor. Because there will be no chance for me to, you can't operate from that mentality position and make any progress. So we must reject the idea that, we must have our own story. Our story must have dignity with us. Nobody will dignify it. It is our own story. And I think that we can do a lot of work to ask the question, what do we have? And work with what we have. And we have a lot.
Too much.
We have a lot. And because the point I made, my own reflection over the last many years is that the crux is leadership. The crux is leadership. And that is why I've invested the last 2.5 decades working on the issue of leadership. And I'm not only talking about the national political leadership. I'm talking about leadership at every level.
Right.
I have, it's a story that never surfaces, invested a lot of my life into leadership in churches. This morning, I walked into a shop and a young woman is listening to a preacher pastor. And I simply say to her, young lady, the pastor you're listening to is wanting to make money from you. You are giving him too much benefit in your space. Just don't listen to that pastor. Get on with your work. So I am very clear myself. To be honest with you, I've invested and continue to invest in overthrowing these narratives and therefore the systems that perpetuate them. But it only begins by realizing that where we are is a story not created by us. And we must create our own stories, must be in that place.
Totally agree.
So that I am committed. But secondly, that leads us to a very decided project of not just renouncing those that have been imposed upon us, those that are external to us, those that define us by their dollars. We must make a choice to define ourselves by the resources that are ours, not the resources that don't belong to us. Our women, our children, our husbands, we must find a way in which we dignify our own story. And as I said, there is a lot I can say to that. My last question, one of the things to overthrow is patriarchy. Patriarchy is not an African system. It's a global system. Africans are not the best on patriarchy. No. I actually would not disagree with you that traditional societies are necessarily patriarchal.
They are not necessarily.
So there are systems we can learn. And I have taken time. One of the reasons I pride in being an elder in my village is actually, it's a beautiful thing. We sat
over Christmas, I had a gathering in my home as the elder, and we had men and women, and we were drinking together, and we were eating meat together, and we were having fun together. There was nothing unique about that. The reason I did it is I wanted to recapture what my father and the uncles used to do. Women and men sat together to tell each other's stories. The devaluation of an African woman is not just the African traditional systems. There is actually an alliance between that system, and I acknowledge it, with the colonial. So all I'm simply saying, let's grapple with what we have, both in terms of economies. We have labor, we have land, we have the factors of productivity with us. We are bright. I go back to that old woman who died at 90. She was a wise woman. Can we tap that kind of wisdom? She looked after her children. By the way, the other thing that was said at her funeral, all her children are alive. All of them. She didn't bury any of them. I mean, I was like, wow.
That's unusual.
Yeah, absolutely. But the story is told of how she did it. Her husband was the first one to die. So all I'm simply saying is we can actually start with what we have. And yes, we have each other. We have each other. But also, look around ourselves. We have very productive land. I am very persuaded that one of the things we must fight to protect is our land. We must fight to protect that land. But not only protect it, but make the most use of it.
Exactly.
So-
Great.
That brings me to the question. Make use of it how? So if I go back, well, I can't say, but like if I go back, if I think about some of the communities have been in, people are not land poor. They're actually land rich. But you really think that if that man's 2,000 acres, he would have developed it to the extent that would give him financial liberation, meaning that if a child needs to go to the hospital, he's not trying to sell off everything he has to get that child to hospital. Like there's some other
No, absolutely.
seasonings
I
that
can
need to
tell
happen
you,
in that
we'll-
whole
we'll
picture.
Add technology,
Right.
But you will not add technology if the land is gone.
No.
You will not add technology if you've not reformed your education system.
Of
So
course
the things
not.
I talked about are prior to
Okay.
the question you ask how.
Yeah.
Actually, the utilization of land is not rocket science.
No.
It isn't rocket science.
The
It's
Egyptians
very
were doing it like long time ago, right?
And I go back therefore to the quality of leadership.
Right.
If we can't deal with the leadership crisis we face, we can pray, we can wish, we can discuss.
But then
we
who?
must deal with it.
So then the question then,
It's
the
me.
other question is, who deals with the leadership
I am
crisis we
dealing
have?
with it. You must deal with it. We all must deal with it.
Yes.
At every level.
Right.
Whether it's in church, in a secondary school, at home, the way families are managed today is
Right.
horrible. This abuse of
So-
women in our families
Right.
must stop.
Right.
And we must point out the men who are
I am
abusing-
totally
the
in.
men who are abusing their men. But we also must talk about these women
You
who are
have
abusing their
checked that.
husbands.
It
The
goes,
abuse of women, men by women, is increasing.
but maybe it's their way of rebelling against the
We can't justify any of them.
no, we can't. But having said, I totally agree, and I think that we have to be bold, and it's not like paying lip service, but I think it's in the doing, and it goes back to what Ian says. You must have grit, because this is not going to be an easy task. It's not like a one and done kind of thing. It's like a whole generational kind of intervention.
I think we've got to stop pointing fingers
Right.
at other people, even though they're to blame. They definitely we know our leadership is poor and all that, but I think that David, I think you said the World Trade, WTO, rule of what we talked about rules-based international order. A lot of that stuff's breaking down now under Trump.
Yeah.
And but it is kind of just, it is what it is. There's no point in us going on and saying, as our president says, the coffee industry is worth so many billions of dollars and we only have 2% of it. You can't own every coffee shop in the world. You can't own every value addition in the world. And there's no easy answer. Things are what they are. You start where you're at,
Right.
and then
go.
you go forward.
Mm-hmm.
And I love what you said about if you're not creating the next leadership, if you're not amplifying, then it's not just about your leadership, it's a dead end. So I believe that the responsibility is on us.
Yeah,
You
the
know,
onus
the
is ours,
responsibility is
right?
on us.
Mm-hmm.
And I still, Zach, you and I have seen it. You know, you see these kids walking through my farm from the local villages, and they're not being educated. And you know, no matter what you say about Western education being imposed or whatever, and the bad, you know, the very poor education system we have here, it's all we have. And you know, if we don't take what we've got and make the cake and do something about it, nobody else is going to do it. And I read an article this week by obviously a very, very well-educated, well-informed Ugandan who was outside the country, I think. And he was having a discussion with someone who said, but you know, when you look at all these societies, you know, they all went through these periods of chaos. They went through these periods of being very badly governed and all kinds of things. And many of them, you know, came out of, well, you can't keep comparing Uganda to Singapore. You can't, you know, you can't just like, oh, this nation state did this and look at us, look where we're at. They had a very strong leader. But when you look at the evolution of all nations in the world, it was a messy affair. And we're in the mess, but my goodness, we have so many brilliant Ugandans. And it's this thing where I see it all the time, where you have got Ugandans who are very brilliant, but they're the problem. They're not. They're the guys who have, and they can analyze the problem. They can tell you what is all wrong with everything. They're economists. They're managers. They're big people, and mostly they're the people when they have the opportunity they'll steal you blind. But they never admit that. You know. But leaving all that aside, it comes to this young man, this young lady, these two old men. For that we provide the leadership and we do what we can and we move things forward and you know, like I find it interesting, you know, and this is the whole point of the Two Sages, we disagree. We come from two different cultures, but we are committed to Africa. We're committed to the development of this country. We're passionate about it.
I think the other word, just to throw it in, I actually learned also language matters. I no longer use the word blame. I use responsibility. I think that people must learn to take responsibility.
Be accountable as well.
So I think what we are saying, we must be accountable for our beat.
Right.
I must be accountable for the beat called my family, the beat called Uganda, and by the mercies of God, I have a bit more. And I can say this, by the way, that in all my life I've sought to be able to make that difference. So I could tell you stories of what it is then as of now. This podcast is important. While I agree on action, I also plead we need depth of thought, depth of analysis. We need research done. A lot is said about what failed with us, and actually that's not true. We haven't done the research. We need people who are thought leaders, but which thinking is informed by research that is done here. So I really hope, and that's why my commitment to a university is research. Research is what drives innovation,
right?
You know, and I think we need that. So I think I totally agree that wherever we are, whoever it is, and yes, the elite of Uganda must take responsibility for the failures of today's Uganda. I actually tell my generation, we are the problem of Uganda. We are the people who are in power today in this country. They are my generation. We were together with them in military school. They came and plundered this country. We are where we are. And I think we should tell tell your parents, take responsibility for the mess you brought us into. They must take responsibility. We are not blaming them. Take responsibility. They need to be able to stand and say, we got it wrong. The people who brought Museveni and led us here, thanks be to God, they're standing up and they say, we didn't know this is the block we had. you know? And Museveni should take that responsibility. And everyone should take responsibility for what wrong we have done, and then also take responsibility for doing the right thing. And we all have something indeed where we can start, all of us,
Yes.
including myself.
Great. I want to conclude with a story. It's based on, it was triggered by what Zach said, that each of us has to do something. It's a story of the first billionaire, recorded billionaire, J.D. Rockefeller. He grew up in a very troubled house. His dad was a con man, and his dad ran away and deserted them. So he's part of like those, like you're seeing those current billionaires growing up that way. So he grew up, his drive was pushed by that neglect from his father. So he grew up, and he started as a trader of fresh farm produce, and then the oil rush happened, and he started a first refinery with a partner. The first business was with a partner, and then they got into oil together. The partner didn't want to overexpand, so they part ways, and he bought the company, and then he just created this huge monopoly made up of secret agreements. It was ugly trade. That's all I should say. Buying off the railroads and outcompeting people by.
That's Rockefeller.
Yes.
Yeah, J.D. Rockefeller.
I'm still waiting to know why you're telling us that.
So J.D. Rockefeller, in all senses, he was so rich, but he caused a lot of suffering. But how does Standard Oil get broken down? That's the story no one says. Who broke Standard Oil? It was a lady and a journalist. Her dad owned an oil company when she was young, and it was one of the first oil companies that Rockefeller bought. When she becomes a journalist, she investigates Rockefeller. She was called Macaulay, and she writes a book about the history of Standard Oil. And this book becomes famous, and this is the book that President Roosevelt reads. And Roosevelt calls for an investigation into Standard Oil, and Standard Oil gets broken down. So in that story, that brings me to the point that some of the problems that persist are waiting for women to be supported to do what they have to do. Because Rockefeller was being supported by all these men, and all these guys could not stand up to him. And then this one lady in her office of a magazine, she sparked something,
Yes.
and the world economy has changed. So that brings me back to summarize the discussion of productivity and women, and why I think women will save the world. There's this book Ian and I have listened to called The Alchemy.
The Alchemist by
No, not The Alchemist.
It wasn't
Alchemy. It's just called Alchemy.
Alchemy.
Rory Sutherland. He's a marketing expert, and he talks about the dishwasher proof kitchen. And he says there are two ways to get your kitchen or to have only dishwasher proof utensils. One is you keep, like you go through laboriously when you're buying, you check, is this dishwasher proof? When you go to your kitchen, the ones you have, you keep testing, and yeah, like methodically, like a physics experiment almost. But then the other option is that you wash all your utensils with a dishwasher and keep those that remain. And they may not look very organized because there will be different kinds, yeah, but you will end up with a resilient kitchen that is dishwasher proof. And that's where his book stops. But then I was like, then if you know the ones that are dishwasher proof, but they don't match and all that, and my girlfriend likes matching things. So you're like, then you go and buy the ones that are like this. So I feel, and that brings in the thing of women and productivity, that the world has been optimized for this kind of efficiency where you just pick the ones that seem like will work. But the other option of just giving everything a chance and see what survives has been ignored. And that's why we are missing out the outcomes like what Macaulay did to break Standard Oil, or what I'm reading about DNA. The discovery of DNA was based on data by a woman.
Mm-hmm.
The men just did the inference.
Yep.
And I imagine there's many discoveries like this, but not just history. Even in the future, there's many problems that have not been solved because women have not been given
the
platform
right.
to solve it.
But,
and that is the final story for today. Those are the final
and I
stories.
want to say that women are not given.
Give me your closing remarks. And then we shall
my
close,
closing remark is women are not given a platform easily. So
easily
in bold. And so women have to be empowered, which comes back to the education system, to be able to stand up and either take it or be able to, shove around like the same way that men do, to be able to stand there and be given that or take the opportunity.
Or men like me can optimize systems to make sure.
And why wouldn't a woman optimize it?
Women
Remember that
too
she
should do
has
that.
a different experience than yours.
Everyone should do that, to optimize systems. Because there are actually systems that are led by women, but are bad for women.
Yeah.
Closing remarks.
I would say language.
Language.
I don't think women should be given.
Oh.
Yes.
I think women should take.
Thank you.
Because as soon as you say women should be given, you're giving the power to the men. Who gives?
Who gives? Yes.
So, take. It's yours for the taking.
Yeah.
I know this as a family man.
Yeah.
My friend, do I give my wife? My wife takes and takes and takes. In fact, I have to plead with her to give me. I think language matters, and I think I don't like the language of empower.
Yes.
Who empowers? As soon as you say empower, somebody
you're giving somebody
else
somebody
the power.
Right.
I think that's just that every human has agency.
Yes.
Right.
Everyone. Systems that devalue agency of one human, whether that human is male or female, must be overthrown.
Yeah.
So, talk about the overthrow of billionaires. May this happen faster. May we see the coming down of the Bill Gates of this world, of the John Bezos of this world. Who are the others mentioned? I honestly think they are one of the biggest things that must come down. So the way Rockefeller came down, please, can you tell me other women who are taking this, are bringing down these evil men who are controlling the world in which they are?
That's not what I was focusing
but
on.
I got it.
Okay. I was focusing on
women, please, save us from these bulldozer men who are...
So anyway, to make the point about Ugandan society is actually quite intensely chauvinistic, meaning male-dominated. And although we do a lot of lauding of, we've got women in parliament, we've women in business and so on, in actual fact, the vast majority of women are subservient, and especially in the rural areas. Yep. And they're the women who really carry the burden, and a lot of women's lives is drudgery. I'm not talking about the middle class, bankers and stuff like that. So the problem that we have in Uganda is that men control the means of control of women. Okay, so men like to control women. Men will give women money because the woman pleases them, because it suits the man to give her money. And some women have made an art of this. We know about dentists, and we know about slay queens.
Did you
and
call
blah,
them dentists?
whatever, But we, so some women have made a lifestyle of how to extract money from men. It is, and I feel like it's like, how can you do that? Because you need to be an independent woman. But men are quite happy to talk about women, but as long as the men can control the property and control the means. You see, the property and it's the means of controlling the woman. When a woman controls it, the man is powerless. A woman can go her own way. But and so when you look in the villages, who owns the property? It's not the woman.
No.
It's not the woman. You talk about property rights and all that sort of stuff. When it comes to divorces, you know about people who've divorced and so on. There've been murders. We know plenty of we know people who've been murdered because it looked like the wife was going to assert her rights in terms of property rights. So there's a whole big thing there about property rights and the means of control of the cash, the means of control of the woman, because men can be very generous as long as they're controlling.
As long as it suits them, right?
So it's the means of control. And I don't think we've even begun to scratch the surface.
No, I don't think so as well.
So sorry about that.
Okay, this is a deep discussion. We've scratched a little bit of the surface. It's been great having you, Marianne. I hope you've enjoyed.
You have to be back. Come back.
Yeah, I hope you've enjoyed.
You must have this again.
We must.
Thank you all for listening and watching. And as usual, we hope that these conversations get you to ask questions and have these discussions with your family, with your friends, and this will help us take our society further. Please subscribe, follow us, ask questions in the comment section, and till next time.